Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of my Let's Discuss series. Today I am going to be talking about the best holdings for a starter portfolio, some of my thoughts about it, because I know many of you are probably newer investors who probably need a little bit of guidance as far as just kind of figuring out what you want to put in your portfolio to start out with. If you don't know as much about what exactly you need or you're doing, I know it's very kind of scary to start out with because you don't want to obviously lose money, and obviously there's no foolproof plan against that, but I think there's some things you can definitely consider to help you along in the process. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about some of my more in-depth investing rules, I actually made a video about that a couple weeks ago. My top 5 investment rules, feel free to check that out. But anyway, if you haven't already, check out my M1 Journey video. I put that out on Monday as usual. I talked about some of the best growth stocks to be buying right now, just kind of shared my thoughts on those since I made a splash in one of my M1 accounts. So check that out if you haven't already. And if you enjoy my content, if you want to stay up to date with me, drop a like on this video and subscribe as always. I really appreciate your guys' support. So with that being said, let's get ready to discuss best holdings for a starter portfolio. So to start talking about best starter portfolios and what exactly goes into that, I just want to make it known that really there is no best starter portfolio. There is no one answer as to how exactly you should do it or what exactly you should own. I just want to make that abundantly clear. There are many paths you can take. But I do have a couple of recommendations. First of all, you need to diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But on the flip side of that, don't put your eggs in too many baskets, or don't over diversify. Don't spread yourself out too thin. And by diversify, I mean just be well rounded in the sectors you're in. If you're just starting out, you really only want to have a few holdings, because you're likely, if you're like me, you're probably not going to be investing thousands upon thousands of dollars. You may only start out with a few hundred, maybe 1 or 2,000. So you really just want to have maybe 5 holdings or so to just kind of get your toes in the water a little bit. So I would look at consumer staples, communications, industrials, consumer discretionary, information technology, just to name a few. Just kind of find a company you like in each sector and pick probably 5 of them would be my best advice, depending on how much you're investing or your initial amount is, and just kind of stick with that. That would kind of be my first recommendation. So my second recommendation would kind of be to know what your performance goals are. Do you want to focus on dividends? Do you want to focus on just growth? Me personally, I'm more of a dividend investor. I definitely consider yield or getting dividend payments regularly a very critical aspect of my portfolios, but I think the best course for most people, and myself included, is to have some kind of mix between dividends and growth. People kind of evaluate companies based off their growth potential as well, what they're currently offering as a dividend, or if they could offer a dividend down the road. Just kind of strike a balance that you're feeling comfortable with. Generally, I try to find companies that pay a dividend yield or a portfolio yield between 2.5% to 3.5%. 2.5 is a little bit on the low side, but it's still a pretty solid yield as long as it's surpassing inflation, or the rate of inflation at least. I think that's a good yield to look at. But generally 3 and above is something that's considered safe and good. If you start getting up into 4, 5, and even 6, those can be a little bit more risky, and I would generally try to stay away from those if you're starting out. That would be kind of my second recommendation. And then my third recommendation is kind of look at what your annual growth is. Kind of look at the stock, see how they've been performing over the last 3 to 5 years on an annualized basis. This can kind of tell you where the stock's headed. Is it heading up? Is it heading down? Do you see volatility, some wild swings month to month? But even if that does occur, I generally like to see at least 10% annualized growth. You can go as high as 15, even 20%, which is fine. Obviously, if you're growing at a high rate, that probably won't continue forever. So if you see a stock that's up 100, 200% in the last year or so, probably not sustainable, but that could be indicative that although the growth is slowing down, that there's still plenty of room to run, even though it's going to be smaller returns. So really, if you're getting 10+%, you're doing pretty well. So those are some of my recommendations as far as kind of what to look at, what to plan out for. But next, I will kind of cover some of the holdings I would put into a starter portfolio. So guys, I have created a starter portfolio that I would recommend to you guys. I kind of, when creating it, I kind of thought, what would I do if I was starting all over again, where I was just starting out learning about investing and having my first portfolio. And I kind of thought most people would probably be investing somewhere between $500 to $5,000 as an initial investment in a portfolio, which I would recommend to you guys. If you're on the lower side of that, near that $500 to $1,000 range, I would highly encourage you to have no more than 5 holdings, because you don't want that over diversification. If you're closer to that $4,000 to $5,000 range, I would say definitely no more than 10, and I would really try to stay under that, because when you're in that amount of money, it's best just to kind of build up several positions instead of having too many small positions, if that makes sense. So I kind of chose these as a diverse range of sectors, as well as offering a mix of dividend yield and what I consider to be growth potential. So that's kind of what I had in mind when I created these, a mix of a portfolio. So the first company I would recommend, and it really should be like, think of it as like a foundational piece of your portfolio, is Microsoft. Microsoft is obviously one of the top companies in the world and has been for many years. Microsoft does not offer much in the way of a dividend. They only yield around 1%. But I think they're a very good company that has a lot of growth still left in them. I don't foresee anyone overtaking them anytime soon. I could be wrong, but I fully believe Microsoft is a great holding for anybody to have. And it's actually a company that I wish I owned more of personally. But it's definitely something to keep your eyes on for a long term. The next company is 3M. 3M is a company I actually just talked about last week in last week's Let's Discuss video. I personally love 3M. It's one of my largest holdings. They offer both a pretty substantial dividend, almost 3.3%, as well as solid growth potential. But I think their best attribute is their stability, being able to weather any kind of storm, both within the business and in the economy, which I think any company like that is a great holding to have in any portfolio. The next company is another one that I'm sure many people are very familiar with, and that is Verizon. Verizon is a major telecommunications player. They offer a very good yield of around 4% at their current prices. Verizon's another company that has been growing very steadily over the last 10 or so years, and is really stable in their business model as well as in their industry. I don't foresee Verizon going away anytime soon, and that stability coupled with a high dividend yield is something that I think provides us as investors a unique opportunity. So my fourth company that I recommend is a financial company, personally my favorite in the sector, and that's JP Morgan. JP Morgan is probably the best blended stock that I will recommend today. It has a very healthy dividend yield, but I also think it has really, really strong growth potential. JP Morgan is something that I strongly believe is the best in their sector. I think long term, with projections and their internal numbers are very strong, that I think we could see JP Morgan really grow exponentially over the next couple of years. And with them already paying a very healthy dividend yield, I think they're a really, really good investment for any investors, both young and old, to take a strong look at. If you need a financial stock, I think JP Morgan is a great one to add. So my fifth and final stock I will recommend for a starter portfolio is another one of my favorites. It's what I would consider to be a consumer discretionary stock, and that is Lowe's. Lowe's is a company that's been around for a long time, but really only in the last 20 or so years has their company really grown to be a wide-reaching chain. I know most people have probably at least been in their stores and shopped with them, but I think their best days are still ahead of them. I like them better than Home Depot, if I'm being honest. I don't know why I feel like that, but I do have history with Lowe's, so that could be a little bit of bias there. But I think from an investment perspective, I think Lowe's is probably the superior buy, for both at current prices and for future growth potential. Lowe's is another company like Microsoft that does not offer much in the way of a dividend. Lowe's is a little bit higher than Microsoft still, about 1.4%, which is not a lot to speak of, but they've been growing that dividend for a very long time. They're actually a dividend king, like 3M. So they've again proven that they can weather any economic storm or any trouble within the business, which I think is a great attribute to have in any portfolio. So with these 5 companies as a whole, if you invested in them all at an equal weighting, you would have a dividend yield of 3.3%, which is again in that range that I kind of recommended, between 2.5 and 3.5. So that's a nice box to check off, as well as they've been growing at a pretty rapid rate over the last 5 years. If you would have invested in these 5 companies, again, at an equal weighting, just 5 years ago, you would have seen a return of 108% over the last 5 years, which annualized is about 22%, which is really, really tremendous returns and far exceeding that 10 to 15 range that I would kind of recommend to you guys. So I am definitely no expert. I definitely don't know for sure if these would be your best companies to look at for a starter portfolio, but I truly believe that if I was starting all over again, these 5 companies would probably be my first picks as far as creating a new portfolio. They're all companies I believe in fully, that I think offer both stability and growth. Now, these 5 companies may not have the same growth potential as a company or companies we've seen in the past, like Amazon or Google or Tesla even, but I think these offer more stability than those companies, as well as offering solid dividends and modest growth. So I think if you're looking for companies that you don't really want to worry about, you're just kind of figuring it out, investing, and you don't want to panic and you don't want to worry, I think these are 5 great companies to start out with, to where you can kind of manage it more passively, not having to stare at it every day. But I think these are some of the best companies you could own. So I'll get ready to wrap this video up. So of course, guys, I am not an expert. I'm not a financial advisor. Please do your own due diligence and research before making any investment decisions. I cannot stress that enough. But should you decide that you do want to take the plunge into investing and would like to open an investment account, I would highly recommend M1 Finance. Feel free to use my link down in the description. When you sign up and make your first deposit into your account, you will get $10 from M1 Finance just for doing so as a reward to you guys. So feel free to do that. If you have any questions, please send them my way. I will be happy to answer them. And that kind of wraps things up for this video. Again, have any comments or concerns or thoughts, feel free to share them. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you guys on Monday.